Hey guys, welcome back to Real Housewives Recaps. I am so glad you're here. You guys, we are continuing on with Meghan and Harry, persecutors or victims, Lady C's book. And of course, this is the expanded, the new updated edition, and I'm loving it. And I'm so excited to get into this part with you. This is the juicy stuff you've been looking for. Hint, hint, it goes into some weird movements of one baby bump in this part. So I can't wait to talk about it with you. Again, just enjoying this book so much. I hope you are too. Let's get into this. If you're reading along with me, this will be covering chapter 7 and going in to chapter 8. Again, most of it having to do with weird behaviors and weird bumps. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'm Jen, honk honk, everyone. Now, I'm going to start this one a little different because I'm going to jump ahead. Can I just read you one of my favorite parts of this section? You ready? All right, grab your tea. Here we go. Lady C says, I just have to read you this part. I love Lady C. Lady C, when talking about Meghan and how Mr. and Mrs. Joe Public thought of Meghan. If you want to find this portion, it's on page 216, chapter 7. Okay, ready for this? As far as they were concerned, she was a hypocrite, a sanctimonious, pretentious, affected fraud, a liar, a hard-hearted, self-seeking bitch who had treated her father in a manner they wouldn't treat a rabid dog. Boom! Oh my God, I want to buy Lady C a drink. I don't know. That's amazing. I want to buy her a headband. That is awesome. So well said. And I know it's weird to start the video with this, but I just have to set the tone because Lady C really lays into, this is where we get into the heart of the worst behavior from both of them. Again, not just piling on Meghan, it's Harry too. How they acted so awful toward the staff. It just brings it all back up for me. The bullying allegations and the tea throwing, the reducing staff to tears, the treatment of the royal family, all of it. They go into, she really gets deep in this part. So, I'm excited. Now let's get back into it. Right. So we've left off, they were acting like asses at Eugenie's wedding. And my question is, why, oh why, does Eugenie still seem to support them, from what I could tell? I don't understand that because they really tried to steal the show at her wedding. And according to Lady C, it sounds like nobody was having it, including Fergie, who was especially mad that her daughter's day was being overshadowed by these two numbskulls. So Lady C postulates this has to do with tiara. We've heard so much about the tiara, that emerald tiara that Meghan wanted, but that was promised to Eugenie for her wedding. And anyway, it continues on how they were so wrapped up in themselves, they couldn't think beyond their own selfish concerns. Where have we heard that before? Oh yeah, everything they do. Okay, continuing on with the new parts. Lady C goes into how excited everyone was, from the press to the family itself, about the incoming arrival, right? The birth of the upcoming birth. It's worth remembering that when considering Harry and Meghan's claims to Oprah in the March 2021 interview, Lady C explains that they were so inconsistent. And I've talked about this before too. Even during that conversation, Harry claimed that there was one conversation before his wedding about the possible skin color of any progeny they might have, while Meghan asserted that there was several conversations and it took place with Harry while she was pregnant with Archie. Now, we've been through this. I've heard a version of it was when, I think it was about the time he was telling the family he wants to propose to her, about the time they were about to get engaged, something like that. They said, oh, how wonderful. I wonder what your babies will look like. Well, of course, those two have to twist everything and make it convenient to their own narrative. But I love that Lady C goes on to point out that it's absolutely normal, as even Chris Rock pointed out, for mixed race families to speculate on what a child's complexion might be. Can I just say, I've said it before, I think it's normal in any family. Is the baby going to have your eyes or my eyes, or your hair or my hair? My husband's family is Italian on his mom's side. So there was speculation about, like, if our baby would be tan, which, by the way, pale plus pale does not equal tan. But I just think it's a normal conversation that anybody would have. And it's ridiculous to try to say otherwise. But Lady C is pointing out again how ridiculous they were being about all of it and how they twisted everything. Because if you look at the press at the time, they couldn't have been more thrilled for Harry and Meghan, and now they've gone back and repainted themselves as victims. Meanwhile, Lady C goes into behind the scenes. Things were getting more and more tense. That Meghan would refuse to do more than the absolute bare minimum on anything. And even when she did, she would complain about that. Again, I find this so funny now, talking about the lazy effing grifters that they've earned themselves. And it's apparent in everything they do. It's the bare minimum while buying the most press and then complaining about the press. Then it goes into how Meghan's high opinion of herself led her to the delusional conclusion that anyone who opposed, criticized, or disagreed with her was, say it together, jealous. This is something that that we were talking about. Harry had basically said in the last part of the book. It's this continuing theme that they both spewed, that everyone was jealous of her. That was the firm belief of the delusional duo, that William and Catherine were jealous of them. This sentiment was echoed in Harry's book, Spare. According to the Sussex line of reasoning, William and Catherine were trying to, quote, do them in and keep them down, even before they had boarded the plane. They're talking about when they went to Australia. My goodness. Again, I talked about in the last one, but it's just the most ridiculous claim. I think there's so many to choose from, but this has to be one of the top ones, that William and Catherine are jealous of them. Again, look how this has played out since. William and Catherine never speak of Harry and Meghan. Harry and Meghan can't shut the fuck up about them. They even involve the whale's children. So I'm sorry, who's jealous of who now? And we go back through the Australia trip. I've been through it, so I'm just going to give you some of the highlights here, or lowlights. Remember that she insisted upon her friend Jessica Mulroney, can't stand her either. I've said it on record, I might be wrong. I had a little bit of intel sent to me that they're not actually on the outs. They just kind of have to keep it on the down low. Something about Jessica allegedly uses this for the attention in the press, and also taking a page out of Meghan's book plays victim. I don't care. If they were involved in bullying little Princess Charlotte, then F the both of them. I have no use for either of them. I don't care. According to this, Meghan absolutely insisted that Jessica be there as a stylist. But what it was she wanted give her an all-expense paid trip so she could have a friend there. They could treat it like a lark, but also a massive inconvenience, something to complain about. So according to Lady C, she seemed intent on doing the barest minimum, made herself unpopular with people behind the scenes who came into contact with her, was abrasive, where have we heard that? Oh yeah, everywhere, uncooperative, and downright churlish. Then caused massive offense when she declared, I can't believe I'm not getting paid to do this. Someone who accompanied them had said that. And I've seen some people say that it was maybe even taped or on video or something. I don't know. Heard the same thing, read it in the other books. It's my opinion that absolutely is the case. What an awful spoiled brat. Her whole life was being paid for. Everything. Her accommodations, her wardrobe, everything. She barely had to do anything except for meet a few people, and couldn't even be bothered to do that, and was complaining the whole time, it sounds like. What a nightmare. Yeah, so Lady C fills it in and says, all her living expenses were being covered by the state. She had her friends along for the ride. Her objection was that she wasn't having her palm greased with hard cash. And Lady C points out she's so tacky and vulgar, and it exposed her as being greedy. And one of the insights that Lady C gives here is that, Meghan and Harry have gone to rewrite history and say the press had it in for them. But she explains, no, it was quite the opposite. They could tell that they were being awful. Allegedly, Harry was being awful toward the press. That's something that Valentine Lowe went into in his book. They were being horrible to the press and forgetting that they were invited guests along for this tour. Anyway, but the press were actually doing them a big fat favor and not reporting on how awful they were being. Then you ready for something even more sickening? Okay, here you go. By Harry's own admission in statements that he would later make publicly, he believed that Meghan, quote, was better in the royal role than those who had been born into it. So again, those idiots are believing that they're the most popular and that the family is jealous. All right, let's get into the part you've been waiting for. Chapter 7, I'm on page 215. She's continuing to talk about the awful visit to Fiji. I've been over that in a separate video as well. You can definitely check that out if you want to know all the shenanigans she pulled. Okay, but here's the noteworthy additional part that I want to talk about. It's at this point that Meghan's unique physical attributes became worthy of being remarked upon. Extraordinarily, she began to show, as even Harry would later confirm, despite being only 2 months pregnant. Plainly, Meghan was a most unusual woman, though quite how unusual was still not as apparent as it would become over the succeeding months. Whether this show of pregnancy was deliberate or accidental ploy to soften up the target audience and gain the admiration of the public the way she had gained Harry's, or she was simply exploiting the news of her pregnancy because she's the sort of person who is exploitative enough to mine each seam to the full extent of its capacity. And that's why I love Lady C. So, already noticing some belly area inconsistencies. Weird, right? Also during this time, Lady C reports on an incident I think I talked about before, but I honestly forgot about. I get focused on the tea throwing incident because that's crazy. And now there's another incident Lady C brings up around this time as well that was reported back to her. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm stalling. It's page 219 if you're reading along. What it is that Meghan is alleged to have hurled onto the floor a dress that had not been ironed to her exacting standards, with her allegedly saying, "You call this pressed? This hasn't been pressed. I want this pressed properly now." Can you imagine her speaking like that to anybody? And I mean, that's the worst part of it. You can't speak to people like that. You cannot act like that. I don't care who you are. You cannot. Okay. But you have to see the humor as I do that of all things to yell at people about, sounds like she was yelling at people about all things, but of all things, wrinkles? Really? Wrinkle. Have we seen any of Meghan's outfits? She must be throwing shit on the floor all the time because nothing is ever pressed right or tailored or hemmed or fixed or fitting well or anything like that. So must be that all of her clothes are thrown on the floor. That is the only explanation for the way she wears things. Also during this part, we get into the breakdown of the brothers. And Lady C does add on that the idiot Harry, basically by writing his book Spare, he proves that it's not the press violating privacy. It's he and Meghan. Again, we already knew this, but it's interesting that she addresses that. I do want to draw your attention to page 221 because this is another favorite passage of mine in this section. When speaking about Meghan, Lady C says that girl demands nothing less than total adoration. And if she doesn't get it, you're iced, according to a royal cousin. Also, Lady C says that Meghan Markle is her own creation as confirmed in her 2 blogs. As she put it, you can be anything you want to be. All you need to do is become it. Of course, there's a gap between the reality of what Meghan was and the facade she was presenting to the world, which is exactly why she cannot maintain friendships and why, in my opinion, she cut off the family. Then we get into chapter 8, and again, first page, Lady C hits us with this, talking about how the public's view of Harry and Meghan were shifting and that they could see through her, especially, it sounds like. And while she still had admirers, an uncomfortably large percentage of the population, as well as the press, had decided, quote, she was nothing but a pretentious piffler with the depth of a teaspoon, a sincerity of a phony, and the trustworthiness of a fraudster let loose in a room full of cash. That's something I'm so glad Lady C has gone back and added in, is more explanation of how they can blame the press all they want. It was their own terrible behavior that was catching the eye of everyone, and they could see right through what Harry and Meghan were doing. All right, let's get more into this bump. So Lady C talks about that fashion award show. Remember the black dress? It was one-shouldered, and Meghan would not let go of her bump from underneath. Weird, right? She stepped out onto the stage to present an award. Now, we've learned from many books that this was allegedly not a planned occasion. She just decided she was going to make a grand entrance and hide it from Jason Knopf, if I'm remembering correctly. That was in another book. I think Revenge kind of spelled that out, that it was just like it was going to be a grand look at me moment, and she didn't want to tip anybody's hand. So she just basically didn't tell, but maybe like, I think 1 or 2 people, something like that. So she just showed up at this awards ceremony, made a very dramatic entrance. I remember the black nail polish she was wearing and that Givenchy dress. She would not let go of her belly, and Lady C takes the time to point out that it was very dramatic, and it was a dramatic way in which her pregnancy had progressed. In 5 short weeks, she had gone from, quote, almost as flat as a fried egg on a pavement, as to looking like she was 7 months pregnant. So something weird is going on, and she'll go more into that in a second. But Lady C is talking about what we've talked about, which is she wouldn't stop clutching her belly with both hands, and continued clutching it, and clutched it some more, and still some more. Her hands rooted to the bump like a lizard clinging to a tree, to quote Lady C. It was such an ostentatious display, undoubtedly called attention to her pregnancy, but her critics would allege it also called attention to other less desirable facts, such as her actressy, attention-seeking, attention-demanding, attention-creating conduct. And some of the beauty of Lady C in her writing are just lines like this. So when talking about this moment of, again, being attention-seeking on stage, Lady C says, again, when talking about clutching her belly, let's see, was she afraid that people would miss that she was pregnant if she didn't clutch her belly as if attached to her by a spring? Did she fear it would fly off her body if she didn't hang on to it? Then suddenly all these questions started to, flitter about. That it opened up so many questions, like how many months gone was she? The due date was being kept secret, and the insistence of the couple, in defiance of accepted royal practice, there was speculation that she might be approaching her 7th month, that the baby would arrive in March. So remember, okay, so they're thinking the baby's going to arrive in March, that she's probably 7 months along. That baby arrived in May, if you believe, I don't know what I believe, if you believe them, the baby arrived in May. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Doesn't seem to match up. Then a few short weeks later, Lady C goes into, they had a very interesting visit to Birkenhead. You know the visit, the one in the purple and the red. Yeah, that one. To quote Lady C, Meghan cut an eye-catching figure in the purple dress and scarlet coat. her usual 4-inch stiletto heels, and a brown handbag. And you guys, on page 229, the part you've been waiting for, Lady C goes into it's interesting that the bump apparently had had enough of, quote, lurking within Meghan's abdominal cavity, and a change of scene was called for. So it took a dive between her knees. She goes on to say that this apparent phenomenon happened in full view of photographers. They were able to capture Meghan exiting from the building en route to the waiting Range Rover. And what was formerly the prominent protuberance mysteriously displaced from the abdominal area and started hovering around her knees. Interesting, right? This extraordinary happening was featured by Getty Images. So there's no doubt that the photographs recorded something that actually happened. And since the photographs were not doctored or retouched in any way, their very existence invited questions. Then Lady C points out by the time they arrived at their next stop, it was a Birkenhead Citizens Cafe, the bump had plainly had enough of, quote, Meghan's nether regions, for it had returned to its expected place within the abdominal cavity. That's a magical bump. Okay, so following what Lady C is saying with this mysterious bump and the pictures taken, and then, people are starting to notice some weird stuff going on there. She actually says, let's see, they didn't have to wait long. A picture's worth 1,000 words, especially when anomalies are displayed to the extent that those Getty Images possessed. Okay. But then she goes on to explain, think about it. Their own actions for this period demonstrate with clarity how unsettled and troubled they were thereafter. That is interesting to put on that lens of if there was a sliding situation and people were noticing some inconsistencies that they would struggle during this time, right? And so she points out that now it's because you can go back to that period of time and see how they're acting and see that it confirms that they were frantic with worry. Then January 16th happened, and that's the day where she wore this cream outfit and people allege to have heard a pop. Lady C addresses this and says, yeah, it's interesting that being, quote, a practitioner of yoga, she was able to get down like that on the heels that she wore, and then points out, quote, a popping sound was heard and recorded on video footage of the event. This would encourage people on the internet to suppose that the baby bump had expelled air when it unfurled along with Meghan. Okay, so here's where Lady C brings up such a good point. Think about this time. The press could have run with this stuff, but they didn't. They were being nice to the couple, and points out that at this time, it just didn't exist. The degree of negative press that the couple later claim was the catalyst for this crisis. So I'm using my own mind here and reading between the lines. It sounds to me, in my opinion, like Lady C is trying to say, interesting that this is the time when they claim to have a crisis. And she even goes into, remember Meghan's claims of, wanting to unalive herself still during this time. Could it be that was maybe to divert attention and steer the press a different way? While maybe I'm adding this part in. I'm thinking it's also to garner sympathy as well and to try to keep Harry's attention. Because nothing like bringing up Diana stuff, right? But I hadn't thought about it in those terms. By claiming that around that time, one could say she was maybe trying to put the focus back on herself, making herself seem more, victim-y, sad, things like that, dealing with serious subjects like that to try to divert attention in case someone were maybe thinking about claiming something like, is that bump real? That sort of thing. Another line of note is that night at the Royal Albert Hall, where she claimed, what she claims, it was Harry, not the energized Meghan, who projected a degree of despondency. All right, I'm going to leave this here because next Lady C goes into the ludicrous claims that the palace allegedly wouldn't let Meghan get help after this situation. And Lady C has a pretty good argument for why they're full of shit. Thank you guys so much for being here and for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I love going through this. Let me know your thoughts on all of it. Are you reading the book? Are you just listening along with me? What do you think about everything Lady C talked about in this portion of the book? Dying to know. I'm really enjoying reading your comments on all this, so keep them coming. Thank you for being so supportive while I cover this book. I really do love going through books like this. And thank you guys so much for all the love and support. Of course, if you want to further support, there's several ways you can do it. You can check out our merch, Make It Make Sense. Recollections may vary. Caffeinated and feisty, check that out. As well as Patreon, patreon.com/Real Housewives Recaps. That's where you can become an executive producer, just like the lovely geese and ganders you see on the screen before you. And we do bonus content, deep dives, all that stuff over there. So check that out. Thank you guys for being here. Have the best day. I cannot wait to keep going with this book. Take care. Bye-bye.